Yo, what is up? We are back with the backtesting session number 6, I believe. We're gonna get right into it. So, on the high time frame, Bitcoin, we already know, broke its macro structure to bullish, and we are currently in an uptrend. Locally, we had some exhaustion here, not really coming into a specific POI, coming into this, kind of like this overall distributive region right here is where we kind of were. Maybe there's some lower time frame supply blocks, but the main supply I was eyeing was this one starting here. So that's kind of like a key supply POI with this liquidity. Mark that out real quick with a little bit of liquidity, right before it. There's a POI that we can watch. Just keeping that right there for now with some refined supply in this upper section of that zone. Like this. So there's some POIs I am watching out for. We saw some exhaustion then coming up here. Kind of got that rounding over top forming right now. So this could be, that rounding over top that's going to pull price back a bit further while creating that buy side liquidity to come into one of these POIs. Potentially, maybe we'll get an accumulation there, and then that's going to be a nice location to put in a lower high for the lower low, or a higher low for the higher high. My mistake. Or you could just, accumulate right here. So, we're currently watching this accumulation range. We had some sort of a compression building, all the way from this high down and then, from this low up. And then we saw this pop out. So we could kind of look at that as manipulation here on this move down. This could potentially be, this will move down, could potentially be manipulation where you're popping out first move, fake move of that compression. And then, you can get some accumulation confirmations coming into a third tap POI. So, if you get the high probability confirmations here, I would be interested in trading this as a higher low. Although you aren't in the optimal POIs for that, you did sweep some decent liquidity here. You're just on that first, mainly that first, higher time frame pullback. So it is a reaccumulation. Don't have a whole lot of exhaustion coming into it. So the context isn't perfect. It's more of a, you could call it a semi-counter context, although you do have, a front run of this liquidity, so, that gives a nice, location to target if it is intended to, go up from here, so that can be nice. We are sweeping a decent POI, and you have that compression right here, which, can give confluence to this being a fake move. But overall, I just want to see some fairly high probability confirmations there if I am looking to long that up. But you do have high time frame structure also in your favor. So that's another pro to this setup. Zooming in a bit here. Really nice ranging behavior. Had some sort of an accumulation as the range starting point there. Right there with a bit of a higher up tap 3, but still valid. A lot of liquidity swept here on this move down. Pretty high time frame, 24 days. Coming into that third tap POI, reminding myself what I outlined here. It was this sell to buy that was mitigated on the lower time frame. Any refund levels in here? Looks like we probably have some refund structure demand right here that price may want to come for, and then even lower time frame. Just check out how this block is looking. We have some sort of a sell to buy there, mitigated though, kind of that overlapping effect. So maybe price will want to come down for these lower time frame zones. I'm not gonna outline them unless price does come for them, just because they're not too significant, and it's not like I must, of course. We're already in a decent POI right now for it, and we could also get, since this is a bit more narrow. Yeah, that's a bit low. So price doesn't necessarily need to come for that. If you start coming like super low and you're closing in here, I would really like to see this range with this being a market structure continuation prior to the range formation, and then this can be a super nice range. That's a no-brainer play right there if you can get that range, especially sweeping, you know, into, you know, some of this lower time frame liquidity prior to the inefficiency right there. But we will mark out the POIs there. Check out this move down. It's a bit more of an aggressive move down on that New York, so we can label this as a manipulated move down. Kind of, you know, zooming out right here. I'm gonna try and like visualize this completing. You know, if we were to just, you know, get a move up straight like this, it would overall look like a pretty clean model. Like if you put it in reverse, you can see as well. Could overall look pretty clean. Bada bing. Sure. So we're gonna move on to ETH now. Bitcoin's gonna be one that I'm closely monitoring here at the for sure when I start clicking through these candles. Looking at that lower time frame, seeing what develops. If we can get a local model inside of here, that could be nice. Because yeah, we just currently have that aggressive New York push down that could be seen as manipulation. That maybe, you know, right on the New York PM, we'll get the reversal up. Definitely seen that happen before. You can actually see, I think that's what happened right here. Let me see. There's actually a New York PM push down with the reversal where New York just consolidated, then you have the pop down, pop up for this deviation. So not exactly that, but I have seen it for sure where you get the New York push down with the New York PM reversal. Okay, looking at ETH. ETH was in this higher time frame. You know, I've gone over the higher time frame context many times. We're in that semi-counter context distribution right here with a bit of a narrow third tap. It kind of had like its own PO3 within that third tap with a really nice redistribution model right here. Really good trading opportunity there. And, you know, we came down with some exhaustion, sweeping that low. Not really going to look at this as an accumulation, just due to the fact that this did sweep the extreme liquidity and could be that third tap of this macro distribution here. But, you know, kind of aware of the accumulative price behavior right here. So if we can find, you know, some lower time frame model potentially sweeping this low, you know, maybe something like this, you could look to long that up to here, but not really looking to use this as a range starting point. Also, you know, a local model inside of this, pretty good looking from my first glance. Yeah, pretty good looking demand zone right there. Some kind of an accumulation. Even this, it looks really narrow right now, but it can always happen, you know, if it develops correctly. Even this could be a play where you actually have structure, you know, from this high coming right into it. Nice liquidity build up. I'll keep this range on the chart. Don't think Bitcoin really had a, yeah, Bitcoin somewhat had that range. It's a bit better on ETH just due to the multiple poles of market structure coming into this range and the liquidity buildup at the highs. Bitcoin kind of has that liquidity buildup. I want to mark out this supply zone that really started the aggressive push. We could potentially view as a manipulation zone, a fake supply. Did this sweep that? Yes. Okay. And then we got XRP on the complete other side with a potential distribution here. I'm gonna zoom out though and go over this higher time frame context because always got to do that. So XRP has similar context to ETH, where we downtrended for an extended period of time, coming from over here, and then we have that semi-counter context distribution range right here, where on XRP we don't have a third tap. Where on ETH, you have a technically valid third tap. Where XRP kind of just had this redistribution, front running the extreme liquidity. That was also a really nice trading opportunity there. Now we're coming up aggressive pop up with the range drawn from the first pull after that aggressive pop up. Although there is a lot of liquidity here, that is always, just a bit sketchier. You do have, somewhat of a, extended move away from the low. Like this, but you also just have straight liquidity on the left. So if you can continue this extended move and you continue getting some exhaustion coming away from here, of course all the way up into this POI would be ideal, but it's not necessary. If you're seeing a lot of exhaustion and you can't sweep this easy to sweep liquidity, then price can easily get that local pullback just to a technical target. But locally here, this is just looking a bit sharp, a bit steep coming into it, a bit aggressive coming into it with a bit of a sharp range with that liquidity on the left. After sweeping a pretty key liquidity POI, although it did generate some liquidity afterwards. Zooming in here, we have a decent looking third tap POI. But there is liquidity, a lot of liquidity resting above that third tap POI. So it's kind of like a tap and go, like you really wouldn't want to see price come above this. And let me zoom in on that on the lower time frame. So there's another situation where it can be traded, but you just want to be a little bit more careful with the confirmations, because although you do have more of a semi-pro environment, given the structure pulls up, you actually have a few more than that. You locally have that aggressive move, which just, because technically this is your structure up. So you actually have quite a few market structure pulls to the upside here. You just get this aggressive move. So you do have this liquidity, but there is clear demand right here protecting price from coming to sweep all of that liquidity. So it's not like your range low is just connected with that liquidity. Makes it a bit harder to target that, and a bit harder to use that as a magnet for price when you have a massive demand zone separating those two, with no demand or no supply separating price from coming for this liquidity right here, except for this supply. So yeah, if I am going to trade this model, it can definitely, this is one of those ones where you have that manipulated push up. That's nice. You have the liquidity built at the lower section of the range before the push up. It's not like you got like some crazy liquidity sweep prior to the push up. You just got liquidity build up, pop up. So that can definitely look like some manipulation there. So if you can actually see some good acceptance here prior to that nice move up, mitigating the most extreme part of this demand, the supply zone, that could be a nice short back down upon a quality confirmation, if we can really draw that return to zone all the way up to it. And we're seeing a nice local pivot, and Bitcoin is also making a nice local pivot, because the context on XRP isn't horrible. It's just there's just some room for error within the context. It's a semi-pro environment, but it does have some room for error, where Bitcoin is in that semi-counter environment locally, but on the higher time frame, it is in that bullish structure. So yeah, we have some interesting developments here. Models on either end. Do we have a third tap POI here on ETH? I don't think we had enough time displacement to even. Just mark this out like this. Yep. I think this can be a nice range to watch on ETH. And we came for the most refined region of this demand right here. So model 2 is preferred. So there's not a whole lot of room for error within that. Apart from the fact that this is somewhat of an internal range, if we were to draw this range on the chart, you know, like from the accumulation perspective like this that I don't have drawn, it's in a nice location. But if you were to look at this as market structure coming into a range, it is a bit internal. But, you know, at the same time, we did have a local market structure break bullish, pull back into the demand. With, you know, this was kind of like that topping structure that I was talking about as well. I remember in the last video I was talking about this topping structure here, how it wasn't really a tradable distribution, but you can definitely see the distributive price behavior here where you're sweeping the highs, and then, you know, you get this internal distribution that ended up pushing price down with some nice, you know, deviations and structured move right there with the clear break. And then this provided, you know, a front run of the liquidity POI, retest before popping back down. Moving on to Doge. Yeah, Doge. So Doge and Solana, remember they had a similar playbook where locally Doge here, we had this higher time frame compressing range that was getting some exhaustion to the downside. And then we got this accumulation that did come to the technical target. It didn't really provide any great entry with these sharp moves down. Wasn't really the best looking with, you know, supply creations and just, you know, overall not the best price behavior here for an entry. And then what we had was a liquidity buildup and a super extended move compressing price into this range high, sweeping that liquidity, where, you know, then I started looking at the range from the opposite end, where, you know, this could be a accumulation rolling over into a distribution. So I'm just going to clean this up a bit. Since that already played out, we can just label it with the lasso. Keep it clean. Bang like this. And, you know, just with this buy side liquidity build up above, I would prefer a Model 1. You have a buy side liquidity build up straight into a high probability supply POI right here, with also some lower time frame. Refine supply within. While also having a third tap POI here, where we could look for like a local distribution in. I wouldn't be too eager to just trade a third tap here since it already is an accumulation into distribution and this POI is a bit low in the range. I wouldn't be too excited to trade just a simple break of structure coming into that level. We're gonna mark it out though, because maybe you get like, you know, some kind of a clean top information redistribution right here. You know what I mean? That just looks too obvious to not trade. Could even be sweeping the liquidity of the block. Sometimes that happens when you have just liquidity of the block. You'll sweep the liquidity of the block, looking like you're gonna come for all that liquidity before just reversing down. Something like that could be a trade on Doge, or a, you know, clear acceptance with a nice move up into that supply zone up here for the Model 1. But yeah, the overall context on Doge, this could be a first move fake move prior to price reversing back up, but it's lacking follow through if that was the case. And, you know, there is still liquidity below, so you may want to continue with this move down, sweeping all the way down to here with, you know, the redistribution before, and then have this entire thing be that first move fake move prior to reversing up. It's always possible. So So yeah, I would really, just looking at the overall model, I would really want to see high quality confirmations here, because you can just kind of see with the overall context, trading and distribution here. Also, the fact that it's an accumulation into distribution is already not looking the best. But it is what price locally is giving us, because we have that liquidity build up with the accumulation. It's pretty clear. And if you get a third tap, it can be pretty clear. And of course, if you come for that model 1, you could always just look for a local model there. Maybe that'll feel more comfortable to trade as well, where you just get a local model here, and then you had your exhaustion, your liquidity build up prior to it, and that's in a semi-pro environment, so that can just be a clean, easy trade without having to mess with the distribution to accumulation. You can just look at that from the perspective of this is the technical target, but it could follow through easily to here or even lower. And then on Solana, we had this front run right here, and then we came into some supply after front running the low, so we didn't break any high time frame structure to bullish here. Saw some exhaustion, break a structure bearish, range creation after coming into this key demand POI. And then within that range creation, we were compressing. We saw some sort of a distribution here with that first move, fake move, distribution, model 2, boom, 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 pretty clean looking model. And then from there, we saw it. We also pointed out that price, although we did have this compression with the first move, fake move, that could have gone over into a higher time frame compression. So that's just something we want to be aware of. That this is also a super clean looking compression, although you already had this. This is also a super clean looking compression where this could be the first move, fake move. So that's why I kind of had that highlighted there, where you did actually get an accumulation that had completion. Again, wasn't a super tradable one in line with Doge, but just given the fact that we're in this bearish order flow, I'm still, this hasn't been invalidated, so I'm still viewing it from this distribution perspective, just keeping that higher time frame compression idea in the back of my head in case things start to change. We can quickly adapt. But yeah, this accumulation could easily be rolling over into a distribution after coming up here nicely. I remember I was looking at this originally from the perspective of, okay, this could be so I was looking at this originally from the perspective of, okay, this could be an accumulation, coming into a key POI that's leaving liquidity on the way up. That can easily be just a market maker continuation model. I was mentioning that in the last video, but I wasn't paying attention to the fact that it could be a distribution to accumulation. So this right here could have already been a valid trade. I kind of realized more after the fact. It was after we came for that third tap, maybe I was watching Bitcoin at the time. I can't remember exactly. I have to go back and look. But I remember coming back to Solana, seeing price maybe right here or something. I was like, oh shit, or maybe somewhere after that confirmation. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, I was saying that this was likely to be a market maker continuation model, but I wasn't even considering the fact that we can look for a distribution into accumulation, just because it's a more rare thing to trade. You don't usually see them as often. They're a bit lower probability, so you want it to be, a very high probability context, which, this can definitely fit that because we're in a confirmed distribution, although we did sweep close to, not the extreme liquidity, which is this, but we swept close to the most majority of the liquidity within the range. Although we did build up some nice new liquidity. So yeah, and we got that nice topping formation locally coming into the third tap POI there. Not a distribution in the third tap POI, which would have been ideal, but definitely a clear topping formation. So yeah, not really seeing any local opportunities on Solana. Maybe if we can come down here, we can start looking at this as a 1, 2, and 3. Because, and then, also kind of just say that could actually be pretty clean, where what we did was we had this local compression with distribution first move, fake move, but it actually ended up being a, internal first move, fake move prior to the real first move, fake move, as you can kind of say that. Usually what you would have is this would come incomplete before getting that move up or before getting the continuation. But either way, we had that double compression from the perspective of lower time frame compression going over into a high time frame compression, which isn't honestly super common to see. But either way, what I'm trying to get at is that we had this first move, fake move out of this lower time frame compression that comes to its technical target of this, the distribution it formed. But that lower time frame compression went over into the higher time frame compression, and that could provide another first move, fake move, completing the distribution with an accumulation that ends up, getting that first move, fake move right here, popping price up to here. And then maybe that goes over into a distribution, and we're just literally just trading ranges that are expanding. And because the moment price comes to this technical target, although technically we could have just had this could get follow through because it is a fairly large distribution. It could get follow through to this range low. We're coming down, leaving so much buy side liquidity, and having so much exhaustion at these lows, just sweeping the low, cumulative price behavior here and here, with all this liquidity above. Price may just want to get that relief up after coming to that technical target. So you can kind of look at that as a semi-pro environment. As soon as you come to this technical target, right now it's technically counter because we're in a confirmed distribution, but it turns neutral when you come to that, and then depending on where you come to it, if you come with liquidity, then it turns semi-pro. So that's a future play we could look for on Solana. Another play we can look is just to trade a distribution on the way to that technical target. If you get some kind of a local model, although the way we're coming down here isn't looking super ideal for it. We do have this. This could be decent right here. So I'll just mark out these supply zones. In case price would like to retrace, we could potentially see, maybe we retrace with some nice exhaustion, and then we can create, some sort of a distribution right here that we can just trade down. And, although we're building all this liquidity, we can just look at that from the perspective of, price can get an accumulation once it comes to that technical target. So yeah, that can be a potential play for us here on Solana. And I think we're ready to get into the action. Got all the scenarios pre-planned. Honestly, there's a lot to watch here locally, so hopefully I can, hopefully we don't miss anything. Just got to stay locked in and take my time going through the price action. This entire thing kind of just turns into supply there. I'm not going to put this whole zone on my chart. Maybe I'll just mark it out like this. Where this being the optimal POI, but we can also just have this on the chart just to have. Okay, and I know it's been already 30 minutes of just going over the high time frame price action, but I think it's important to do because when I'm backtesting, one of the main things I'm looking for is to develop my understanding of high time frame context and just have that practice of building expectational order flow, and then seeing how price actually reacts, pertaining to my expectation order flow, and seeing if I was correct, if I was incorrect, where I might have went wrong in my thought process, what things I might have overlooked, things like that. That's one of the main focuses of my backtesting, and then also executing the models. But real quick though, before I get into, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. We are back. Got the different ideas real quick. Click through different ideas. Accumulation idea on Bitcoin here, with the potential distribution if you're coming into that supply we can watch for. ETH accumulation opportunity here. Higher time frame, we could see, we would want to look for distributions coming up into that high. And of course, best play will be an accumulation coming into this low, similar to Bitcoin if Bitcoin comes and sweeps that main low, which could also be a model 1 on Bitcoin. XRP, we got this distribution locally here, so if we start seeing some slow moves up and really high quality confirmations there, that can be a trade. Doge, I really want to see that model 1, but potentially a local model coming into here could be a trade. And Solana here, a similar story to Doge, except we already have that third tap. So yeah, I'm just gonna go, lower time frame here on Bitcoin and just start watching what's going on. So we're getting a move up, which could be XRP coming into that third tap POI. Coming up actually pretty nice with just straight liquidity. Although, locally it's just pretty sharp. So I would like to see a bit more overall ranging behavior and acceptance into here. Like this. Doge got a little ways to come. Solana pulling back with some liquidity. ETH here popping up. Let's see if we can mark out some POIs on Bitcoin and Ethereum for a potential third tap. Just to have those ready. I don't know. My internet. Hope it doesn't fuck up the recording. I don't know if the recording even requires internet. I don't see why it would need to. Let's see. My Ethernet is loose in my PC, so sometimes this happens. There we go. There we go. Should be back in a second. Okay. So damn, yeah, ETH really just coming up with liquidity down here. Not at first glance, not seeing anything super obvious. Just gonna mark out that POI close to that third tap. Right like that, with those kind of, locally equal lows. Although, yeah, nothing too special there. Oh no, we're getting this thing again. That's not good. Is it just on ETH? Okay, just on ETH. I just won't click through candles on ETH. That happened last time on Bitcoin. I just couldn't use the replay mode. Bitcoin, similar story, but we do have a slightly better looking POI here. Seems like when we go on the one. Like this is technically mitigated, so maybe price wants to come all the way down there. But it is a pretty clear looking block, so I am going to highlight it with the liquidity that built right above it. When you get that mitigation, it just mitigates, the very upper section of the block. You still got some inefficiencies below that, and then it just builds liquidity. That can be just a nice liquidity POI that price might want to come and mitigate a bit deeper into the block there. So we're going to keep that on Bitcoin, but that block can always get wicked. So having that scenario in mind, we're seeing New York pop down and then the New York PM push up with technically a bullish break structure right here. Is that right on the New York PM open? Yeah, technically like kind of right on that open. Nice. And then what's our day? Today is Thursday, so just kind of keep in mind where we are in the week. XRP coming into POI, really sharp though. Like I said, wanting to see a bit more displacement there. Solana and Doge coming up with some nice liquidity there, so maybe you'll get that local model we were talking about. And then ETH and Bitcoin watching for a move down or a potential distribution up into the supply. Bitcoin, I'm actually seeing that the supply starts a bit lower. Something like this. It is all kind of mitigated through. And we also are calling it fake supply, so kind of add confluence to it being fake supply. Don't really like this line through the center of it with the model. Yeah, currently not looking like the highest probability local model here, but you can kind of look at it from two perspectives. If we do come down and mitigate that POI, is you come up and then you get that move into it, is you have the local model here, but you also have a test entry like that. So you can kind of look at it from the two perspectives. Although it's not the cleanest local model, it's also technically a test entry to a pretty clean higher time frame model, where if we get that return zone just building straight into the break, it could be nice. Otherwise, just gonna continue watching it. I'm gonna click through XRP here just because it is in POI and it did come up moving straight liquidity, so that can be interesting. Popping up, coming up higher, disrespecting the supply zone, so yeah, no longer gonna be watching that. Really now would prefer just to see a new range creation or a new third tap POI. Get that pop down, supply creation there. Oh, the shit's lagging now, of course, man. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. We'll watch out for that for sure. Somewhat of a new POI creation here with this demand below that liquidity. ETH really popping up there. ETH could always just respect this. That is always possible, not that it would provide any entry for us, of course, with this aggressive move down. But we are seeing kind of what we talked about. Not exactly, because this didn't get a whole lot of follow through, but New York pushed down with the reversal up. Just really indicating that this was manipulation, this whole move down. Some entire move down. Maybe XRP wants to create a local model up here. Checking in on Doge. Missed all this, but yeah, Doge came up a bit sharp, but could have potentially, created a third tap. It's technically a valid third tap because this is your higher time frame, extreme liquidity, and it's deviating tap 1. So although you didn't come for all the liquidity, came for the zone as deviating tap 1, and you created a much better looking supply POI. Wow, yeah, that's nice. So if we can see a retracement into here, this could actually be, tradable as a model 2 then, but again, importance on the model 1. This just definitely kind of changes things because now we have the fact that we came back and touched this low is nice of the initial pop out of the compression. Kind of confirms that price will want to come down. We'll want to continue coming down to this low. Now that we have retraced and just proven that this was a first move fake move. So yeah, I'm gonna mark out these POIs. I'm liking Doge here, honestly. Okay. XRP could be doing something similar. Really, locally not looking the best. This could be a supply POI that you will later come into. It would really need to look exactly like this though. If we're spending too much time up here, then I just want to see that main high get swept for a distribution bite, and that would be really nice. Doge, Solana, just chilling here. Could potentially look at this range. Need some time to develop. ETH is coming back down. Okay, that's nice. Seeing Bitcoin and ETH. Retrace locally here. Man, too much developing locally here to watch every single pair. We're just going to take it slow. See if Doge wants to come up here. Yeah, XRP looking like it wants to form this range. But at the same time, you know, you could also look at this. Okay, look at this. Super ugly though, and super low time frame, and it's on any kind of POI. It just looks whack. Yeah, I'd really rather just see that main high get taken. Doge chilling, ETH, Bitcoin following the plan. Could extend this now. And watch Bitcoin here. Coming up. Another scenario we talked about was a distribution right here that we could receive. So building this liquidity up could be indications that that is going to form. If not, it's even better. Okay, it's still creeping down there. ETH forming some sort of a local 4-hour in duration distribution. Nice. So XRP is truly beginning to look like it wants to sweep that main high. But at the same time, there is the scenario that we trying to think if it would even look good at all. Oh, the scenario of a Model 1 here, because we are building a lot of liquidity. How does that look? Technically, there would be nothing but liquidity coming into the break, and we could view that as manipulation. Yeah, I'll have to see how it behaves. It could be a play for sure. If it's in line with Bitcoin as well, that can be nice. But yeah, really, my focus is really shifting on XRP to that main high. I don't really want to trade anything internal right here. Yeah, I don't. Trying to think how that would look. Trying to visualize these things in advance to them potentially developing. Can, you know, give you an idea of like how much you would like it if it did develop. And then when it does develop, you're not reacting, you're anticipating, and not just, completely reacting to the market. You already had anticipated on the move and how you would react to the move, and then you're prepared. It's a much different state than just seeing something for the first time, like, oh shit, and then reacting. Being prepared, and then if it happens, anticipating on the move, and then if it happens, then reacting and executing. Could kind of call it, anticipating and executing, preparing and executing versus reacting to the market. Yeah, it's still not speaking that much to me. It's not like the worst type of setup in the world, but yeah, there's really not a great POI here, and we're just kind of losing this range. So, maybe you get that continuation up into here. Like, that can be decent. It can be okay for sure. Just remembering that there's all liquidity over on this end. And that Bitcoin is potentially forming this accumulation here. Let's go on the 5. Double checking on Doge here. Doge could do its thing locally. And the more acceptance down right here, the better. Just showing acceptance after sweeping that, really, solidifying that as a strong POI that, had the power to push price and then maintain that move. It wasn't just there just to, push price and then continue higher. And, if the confirmations in here aren't too solid, like I said, that is the preferred scenario, is coming all the way up. But locally, Doge isn't looking horrible. Would just like to see, overturn a zone like this. Solana actually came and took that high, so we could locally see a distribution in here. Bit low time frame. There you go. Kind of a little supply block created by a distribution. Some sort of. Bang, okay. Preferably, yeah, coming into that refined supply there. That can be nice. We got the local exhaustion. Did this just front on liquidity? We kind of came into some kind of a demand. Some kind of. To this. Yeah. Overall, came into something, but there's just a lot of liquidity below. But they are Wyckoff points. I would be interested in trading this. Let me double check. Is this a daily range? Yeah, in New York, I would be interested in trading this. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, everything was just chilling. So yeah, I'm gonna watch this on Solana coming into New York. If we can get that confirmation on New York, that can be a trade. Pushing up. Model 1. Market structure's way down here. What is our... It's a 2 minute. Still in London though. Bit of a deep market structure. If we can turn this into a Model 2 on New York, that could be nice. Really prefer not to trade it on London. We'll just put this back here. That looks retarded, but just want to keep it a bit higher up, keep it a bit tighter looking, so the whole model isn't in a red box. Nice return to zone there. So let's see if it confirms. Double check where the other pair is at. Bitcoin locally getting a move up. Same with ETH. Okay. We'll pull back. Okay. 30, not even a 30-second. I was about to say, we just shoot the 30-second. So what timing is it? 5:47. So we still have some time before that New York. Definitely adding to the sketchiness. Liquidity sweep. Boom, move down. That's your exact break. It is prior to New York. I like that little move up into sweeping the liquidity. It's just really clean local price behavior, and you're in that confirmed model. So I think that even though it does run the risk, and if this does get stopped out, you know, that's when you can start. Like, I've seen it many times where you have the London Asia range right here, Asia liquidity, London liquidity, and you know, to make it a daily range, you win that confirmation on New York, where you have New York confirm the model, and then it reverses the entire day. And I've traded it many times where you get a clean model, but it confirms on that London prior to New York. It's a daily range, but before New York, it's not a daily range. It's just London Asia range, and then the New York opening hour, that manipulation hour, gets you stopped out prior to either a confirmation or just, you know, invalidating the model completely. So that is something to be aware of. But the thing is, this also meets the minimum range duration requirements from another perspective, which is the fact that we're in a confirmed model. So you can trade a model that is below the 1 day in duration requirement. So we're not reliant on this being a daily range to meet that exception. So it already does meet the exception technically here. And the context is nice. And it does, you know, it doesn't really have any room for error within the Model 1 POI. Let's see what that RR is. We are getting a nice move that it just kind of like, yeah, that stop loss, that's the best placement it gives me. It's kind of like, I'll just put it like that. It's a 2.25 to there, but then you can also technically trade it to the technical target for a 10. So maybe, you know, you de-risk it and then just let it run, or take a 50. Take a 50% right here, and then just let it run. Because there is a supply POI higher. Take a 50% partial at the extreme liquidity. Let the rest run to the technical target, or maybe just the extreme liquidity of this model, or even the higher unfair model. Could be an option there. Yeah, just for that 10. So 50%, you know, you basically go risk-free, risk off, and then you continue down. Well, the other thing to note too is that this could be a valid reason to put your stop loss here. Oh, not the 3 month. It's not one of the 3 month. This could be a valid reason to put your a valid place to put your stop loss right there. That is a factor to consider. That you could put your stop loss right there due to the fact that you mitigated the extreme. See if there's any even lower time frame POI. I'm not seeing anything. Oh, you do have this. That is pretty clean on the 15-second. And you're going into New York, so it's like it feels for me a bit sketchier to have my stop loss that low in the range, and more just look at it from a trailing perspective, and just accept the 225. Man, yeah, it really doesn't give me that creative placement. My trade, look how off the trade is from everything. I think that's pretty accurate though, because it's slightly above there, and slightly below here. Or maybe that's more accurate. Yeah, that's more accurate. 2.13 RR here. 15 hours. Checking in on Bitcoin's location here. Sweeping some local liquidity, could be creating a local pivot. Not anything too significant. Still having this liquidity POI higher. So maybe New York wants to open up and grab that before coming lower, if it is intended to come lower. XRP just compressing here. So yeah, I'm really starting to just see this as a new range creation. Oh, Sui had been launched. Maybe I said train Sui in these videos too. No, damn, it just got launched. It's probably shit fucking. I didn't know that shit got launched in the bear market. Okay. Alright, so we checked where everything's at. Nothing really too new. We have our model that's confirming. We have our plan. Now, real quick, I'm going to go into this checklist because I always do the checklist before I enter a trade, just for me. Something I like to do. Context, we're going to call that pro. Pro, mid-time frame, semi-pro locally with that little exhaustion coming up. Front running some liquidity, coming into a nice POI. Return to zone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 or so. Lows, that's good. Range duration, it did meet the exception. It's a 16-hour range duration. Tap displacement is smooth. Third tap POI was nice. Range and efficiency, we can double check that volume profile there, see what's going on. Yeah, look at that deviating right above that volume rate high. That could also be reason of why you can potentially being valid to put your stop loss there. Yeah, that could be a smooth way to run it. I'm still considering. Just gonna run through these variables first. Supply demand creation, yes. We tested into it, then we created a new zone. So the fact that we're creating another supply creation is pretty nice as well. The fact we have that local liquidity sweep, extreme mitigation, then create a new one. It kind of gives that test entry vibe. It would have been smooth if this did this. Boom. That would have been a tight entry. But either way, that's not what we got. This is pretty nice. We already came up and deviated that volume area, but you could always do this. Yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to play it safe there. Confluence. Bitcoin is just kind of neutral right now, I would say, locally here. I would really just call that neutral. It could go up from here. It could go down from here. This, liquidity POIs on either end. Yeah, it's really just neutral locally here for that local model to play out. You swept some local liquidity to the high, so maybe a bit more in favor of coming down for this liquidity below. There's a bit more liquidity locally here below. The fact that you just swept this and kind of saw a wick into it could be decent. But you could also want to come up for a higher time frame liquidity sweep, which could just make Sol, retrace into that higher up POI before moving down. There isn't any reasons to exceed the Model 1 high on Solana, so that could be the case. Breaker structure did have some nice aggressiveness, didn't have a whole lot of price displacement, but it did have the aggressiveness, so that's something to note. Validation is super high quality here. This wick right here, super high quality. This would be a bit lower quality of an invalidation for sure, but it could definitely work. Confluence, I'll say neutral here. Locally. The timing, Asia, London, range, monitor how it behaves going into New York. And then we always like to inverse these. Zoom out a slight bit. Inverse the model. How is it looking on the as an accumulation? Looks pretty smooth still. Looks pretty smooth still. Yeah, coming into that POI of the accumulation here. Yeah. Room for error, higher up POI, low time frame going into that. Going into entry prior to New York, London, Asia range. I just like to type these in individual ones, like the room for error, the context, and confluence, just because these ones I will put into my journal. Like I like to just log the context and log the room for error on the model, and also the range duration. So sorry that this takes a bit longer, but it's a process I like to do for myself. It's a nice habit that I think is worth building. Okay, entry prior to New York, London, Asia range, higher up POIs, and BTC not having clear local direction. And then first trade after a loss would be actually yes, so you'd be more vulnerable to be fearful of entering a setup, and yeah, so I'm liking this. So I'm gonna take this trade. Had that. Pull that off the chart. We can just see how this plays out now. I like to click through the candles on the lower time frame just to see how price behaves. Also, I wanted to watch that New York open. Flushing down. The TP plan was like a 50 here. 50 as a front run. What's that volume area low doing? Deviating the volume area low. Going into that New York session. Sweep of this low. What is that? Yeah, I could already be de-risked with that first 50% for sure by now. I'm gonna sweep that low, for example. Although we are front running out, we are below that volume area low. There we go. Hit the technical target, and looking like it wants to reverse from there. Yep. You see what I mean with the New York manipulation? What is this? First hour of New York, and I'm like, yeah, this is why it can be a little bit riskier entering in London. It was a high enough probability of a model that it played out regardless. Took that 50% TP here with the other 50% running down to here, and that just got stopped out. So I'll write that on the chart just for when I log this. 50% TP range low, 50% to run to technical target. Throw this in the trade box. So that's interesting. Curious what Bitcoin ended up doing in that period. Yeah, Bitcoin did. So we did actually, and this is also another reason to make sure you risk off is on that New York. I didn't even check Bitcoin here, which could have been a good idea to do so. Didn't necessarily matter because I did what I did anyway. But you can see how you came down locally, swept that liquidity here. So when you got that move up and then New York liquidity sweep in that first couple minutes, that can be a clear reason to de-risk. Now all the liquidity is pointing to the upside and you're going to that New York manipulation. Okay, so this could actually provide, maybe an entry on XRP. ETH is actually, kind of locally distributing here. So I'm under that. That range itself looks pretty clean. And then maybe this price will want to, distribute here and then come down and sweep this low, for example. Maybe it'll just come down to here. Maybe it'll sweep this low before accumulating. But ideally, you come all the way to this low. So there we go, first trade. You can see this is still glitched out. There we go, boom. Exactly what we were talking about with that compression, getting that first move, fake move there. And technically we have a breaker structure here. This could already be an entry here on XRP. I'm not sure if we... yes, this could go into a Model 2. But it could, since we have the Model 1 going into the compression, it gives the vibe that we could just, get the compression, first move, fake move up. Prior to a reversal all the way back down. Where I would take my first TP here. You could just de-risk it right here. I would really like to get a higher RR entry there. Yeah, you can see the compressions. The compressions are in full effect recently in this environment we're in. Been seeing a lot of compression plays for sure. A lot of just compressing price action, giving first move, fake moves, stuff like that. Where it's just kind of stacking, compression, boom, compression, boom, and that also gives confluence to this being at the starting point of your range and not this due to that compression, because sometimes you'll have that compression, it'll look a bit uglier, it'll look a little bit like, this should actually be the starting point, but it's because you had that aggressive move due to the compression that made it look a little bit weirder. But yeah, this could for sure be a play just all the way down to here. With this being another POI to watch for. In combination with Bitcoin and ETH sweeping this local high. Look at that buy to sell we got. Clean POI here. Where I think I'd look to enter this and then refine it upon a mitigation. Because usually when you have those compressions, you're not necessarily expecting a Model 1. You wouldn't expect a Model 1. You wouldn't expect to see the compression. First move, fake move high. Although we did right here. But we left a lot of liquidity, so that could be a reason. What is this? Right on New York, too. Right on New York. confirmation almost exactly an hour in. Feel like it is adding up. Doge locally. Could want to develop something here. Yeah, I think this could be a trade on XRP. Looks a bit weird. I'm gonna flip it upside down. Yeah. I mean, the return to zone is there. Manipulation move down is there. Third tap POI for potential Model 2. Model 1 into a Model 2 is there. A lot of liquidity below you there as well. Kind of even had a compression here. First move, fake move, man. Just boom, boom, boom. Maybe this will be the stopping point. Who knows? Maybe it'll do it again. But yeah, low key. Yeah, not your typical looking model from a appearance perspective. Super clean high though, super clean technicals just overall. Very definitely valid from a technical perspective. You did have that local exhaustion locally here, and then you definitely got to move away from the low. But there is liquidity above you. You're getting the timing, confluence. You got Bitcoin ETH locally, creating a pivot. They're still, a bit more neutral, but locally could be, that buy to sell could be nice. Especially, confirming that that's going to be the direction price moves for the rest of the remainder of the session with that, first hour of manipulation being up and getting the breaker structure. So yeah, I could see this for sure. And then if we do get a reconfirmation, something like this, where you maintain the move, and then you get a breaker structure here, you don't even need to come into this, then you just refine your position, which can be pretty nice because your stop loss is way up here. So moving it down to here, if you can get a tight entry, that decreases your total risk a lot. Then you can just add that right back in. Add like another 0.5 risk, and then you're for a much higher RR. That can be nice, and you're already in a position now. So yeah, quickly gonna go through this checklist here. I call this semi-pro locally. Semi-pro. Turn to zone is there. Range duration 2 days. 2 days, 13 hours if I recall. Top displacement was like damn near perfect. Third tap POI was just a Model 1. Didn't really have a POI on this left side here. Did not, no. No, it's just liquidity to the left. Range and efficiency. Yeah, I didn't check this volume. I'm not really sure. I don't think the volume's going to look that good. It's going to look like 2 ranges, yeah. Because you kind of saw this volume gap in the center here. But you did get a nice deviation of the volume very high, surprisingly. Yeah, so things are looking decent there. Gonna watch how price comes into this. This should be a manipulation POI, so we should just see it get smashed through, or some consolidation in this region for a Model 2, something like that. So I guess we can't be too fearful if we accumulate here because we still have the potential of a Model 2. Break and volume was a yes. Supply demand creation, that's a yes. Breaker structure quality, definitely aggressive. You did have that trap zone potential down here, but we're viewing it as manipulation for 2 reasons, from the compression perspective and the timing perspective. Breaker structure is looking smooth. I think you can see it. It kind of does disappear all the way up until like the 3 minute. 2 minutes fine. Yeah, it didn't give the most refined entry perspective, but it had that nice top information for sure. I didn't get the most recent entry. Oh, that's the perspective. Confluence, we were gonna call that locally semi-pro. Locally semi-pro. Mid time frame, maybe like neutral. It's kind of in a weird place because we could be getting an accumulation here on Bitcoin. We could be coming into the third tap POI there, but the fact that you're sweeping this liquidity reversing, after building even more liquidity down here, really doesn't show that it's ready to go higher from here, and we have a POI lower to come for, and the accumulation itself was semi-counter, so I'll just call it locally semi-pro. But if we see Bitcoin getting confirmations in here, we'll definitely have to monitor the XRP trade in combination with that. And we'll see how XRP is coming down. This should be aggressive. We really don't want to see, not instantly. It could be like this. Could look super clean. The timing is right after New York manipulation. Our thing is, I think we're on a weekend, Friday. So that could be good, going after post New York on a Friday. You can get those volatile moves. So if you're expecting a volatile move on a Friday, so post New York, if we're expecting the remainder of New York to continue in this direction based on the fact that we confirmed after the manipulation hour was over, if we're also expecting a volatile, we could get volatile moves after Friday New York going into the weekend when the volatility is at its lowest, and those like after hours, after New York PM, and we have a model that just confirmed, that could just be the volatile move that can complete that model. So yeah, inversed, it looks solid, a little weird with the double compressions on each tap. That's something I have yet to see, like the double compression going into each tap. So I'm curious to see if it works. I'll write that down just to kind of journal it. The aftermath, curious to see if that works. And then the room for error is liquidity on left, BTC not having a super clear direction, mid time frame, and sharper deviations with potential fake demand creation. First trade after a winner, so somewhat of a winner, and we can break even. So it could be overconfident with this one. So yeah, we're gonna see. Throw this in that folder like I did with the last. Rename tray 1. Okay, let's see how this goes. I'm gonna bring down the time frame and just kind of observe. Pop down a bit further there. Creeping up, this is where we want to see bearish confirmations. We could even look to trail the stop loss. Can mark out this as well. So analyzing, your emotions as, when you're backtesting, analyze the emotions as prices, retracing towards your stop loss, that kind of shit. Let's see here. Some sort of topping formation, sweeping this liquidity, front running the POI. That's nice. See if we can come into there. We got nice range creation. This is what I was saying I wanted to see for sure. So ideally we can come up. Okay, so we've gotten this move down. Let's see if Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin coming into its third tap POI or what's going on here? Bitcoin got like both sides of liquidity sweeps. And now we're probably just gonna range coming into the weekend, let's be real. So Maybe we'll get that XRP confirmation on a Sunday, but that would be that's a bit too long. I'll pull this forward, but we are approaching the minimum duration, exceeding the minimum duration. Wow, except ETH actually came up. I wasn't watching ETH. This is pretty clean. We are short on XRP. Let's see what that confirmation was looking like, though. That's a pretty clean topping formation there. Can't even click through candles on ETH. Anyways, what do we want to call that? I'll call that structure, although it isn't ideal. What happened here? Bounced from it, and then you kind of disrespected it by that point. So, I mean, yeah, that could have been an entry on ETH. There was some demand creations on the move up. Neither too significant. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there could have already been a valid entry, potentially. The context wasn't amazing. XRP was definitely, a bit better from that perspective. We have an extreme liquidity POI here. You had this as your extreme supply. So maybe you gotta move up there. Gonna continue watching XRP here though. Creeping up. Like this is a really nice looking range. Let's see what we can get. I don't know if I would have taken XRP and ETH right here. I was already in XRP at the time, so in XRP I think had the better context. Yeah. But looking to be a valid model there on ETH. XRP actually coming down for this low first. So maybe it even accumulates locally. It's all internal at the moment though. Bitcoin is compressing over the weekend. Time is it? Still Friday. Should buy a check on Solana. Our friend Solana. Yeah. If you come up and sweep this high, I'll still look for a distribution, but preferably we come up above. Let me actually box this. Okay. Yeah, XRP definitely my main interest at the moment. This is looking clean. If we can come up and start, tap into some supply. Forming an accumulation here. Bit low time frame though. Not like a tradable one, I would say. 11 hours over the weekend. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe we get some more exhaustion to the downside. Confirmation like a New York session or something. Okay. Okay, moving up. This is still a range. Still a range for sure. Yeah, there's that dead weekend price action still. ETH pushing up towards the stop loss of the potential trade. Didn't run through the checklist or anything on this one. I guess that was technically what I marked out for a re-entry. And it came up with a nice return to zone, but it looks like it's failing now. So that's not nice, but like I wonder like this. Seems like it could have been a nice entry, maybe. What is this? Looks like it's exceeding the duration, but quite a bit though, yeah. I think if I just remove the drawings, you can see that it's not looking like a model really anymore. It's getting too dragged out. So I'm looking at that main high now with the way we're crawling up. You should have all liquidity on your left too. Yeah, this ETH model, just looking at the context of this, even this local one, it's okay. The local one's okay. This is just getting a bit too large compared to this liquidity trail and this overall cumulative price behavior you had at these lows. So who knows, maybe we start to see, like this is just lost now. This whole thing is kind of lost now. We'll just look at it like this. Remove some of those drawings, clean it up a bit. This pop up though, we'll see what's that looking like on XRP. Yeah, just gonna mount XRP here. Getting a pop up on New York on Saturday. Curious to see what can happen here. There you go. Pretty aggressive there. Where are we? After hours on a Saturday, so that could be manipulation. It's getting a bit extended there. Maybe we're gonna come and sweep this main high and form a range that way. It's always a scenario. I'll put this in the trade thing just because clutters the chart a bit. So yeah, there's that. See what it wants to do here. Coming down with liquidity above. Really low volatility on this weekend. Gotta make these red. Yeah, maybe watching this range though for just a distribution play here. So we can look to refine our entry down on. We have mitigated the most extreme supply that I was aware of. Yeah, it looks to be. And then see what we do here. See what's going on. Pretty narrow with no return to zone there locally. But it did receive a breaker structure. Had some demand on the pop-up. Really looking to be careful with how I enter this. And that was technically a market structure low within this move up. So that never broke, and that just kind of had a slow grind down with this. So let's see what happens here. I like to see just all this liquidity get swept. Yeah, just ranging over the weekend. Just marking out the local stuff. Yeah, really building a lot of liquidity after that. So, this could be a potential third tap right there. We got equal highs right here. So, if you come up like this now, that can be nice. Ideally, you just come up all the way to here and just boom. So there you go. Sweeping this liquidity. See what's gonna happen here. Super low volume. We could look at this as structure, but we're gonna just it's not the best looking structure, let's be real. Just super low volume candles, so it's kind of hard to like what? Like if that's the high you're putting in, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candles on the 2 minute. Don't want to put my stop loss there necessarily. What's our timing here? Saturday, pre-London. So that was your Saturday Asia. That's decent timing. This is also decent timing. Maybe we want to look at this as our structure because this actually is valid structure. Same with this one, but we can look at this. Man. Alright, let's see where the rest of the market's at. this right here could be your potential third tap. Looking a bit better from a bearish perspective on Bitcoin. Yeah, that's super narrow. Don't think I would have wanted to trade that. Oh, Doge's actually coming up here. Doge could get a potential confirmation there. Solana ranging in the, just ranging locally in this range. Is that everything? Yeah. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick before I resume. Okay, we are back. Let's take a sip of water. Hour and 37 minutes into the session. Let's go. Curious to see what we can get here on XRP. Well, you know, Bitcoin's locally sweeping some liquidity, tapping into what looks like a mitigated region. So yeah, either way. So we got sell side liquidity below, liquidity sweep above, some buy side liquidity above as well. So on the higher time frame, so still fairly neutral, disrespecting this demand POI that popped us into it on that Saturday Asia session, which has been known to cause some manipulated moves. XRP technically getting some sort of a break right here. Let's see what we can call this. I'm just not super convinced by this high formation in general, although it is valid and it is very high RR. It's just not the cleanest looking price behavior, especially going into that weekly open. But there's some time before that weekly open. Trying to see what time frame of structure we had here. Are we breaking this? Like when you're coming down super unconvincingly, I prefer to see like the higher time frame structure. You did break that in a decent fashion, and you kind of got this topping formation. This could be a place to just enter a trade. I'd rather not mess up my existing position and just enter like boom, just throw a percent on this and just keep my existing position. But you know, of course, if price goes up from there, then I get stopped out on both. I just am not super convinced by the stop loss placement, although it could work. So I don't want to, you know, mess up my nice entry from here, or my nice entry that with the stop loss there, and risk losing that, you know, when price could do this. But at the same time, if price does do that, I can just re-enter. That is a good point. I can just re-enter here pretty easily. Like, there's probably gonna be a re-entry. If this stop loss gets kept intact and price is intended to go to that target, it'd be pretty hard, like from this position we're in right now, to not give a re-entry, even if we come up like this and come down. So I could just trail and add this here. That'd be a pretty mighty trail there. Yeah, I mean, it does meet the technical requirements. It just doesn't have the best looking high right here, but it is also on that weekend price behavior, and you did get a good top information. So sometimes you can just have those ugly looking highs. Deviating that volume area. So yeah, if you can come sweep this, that's gonna be ideal. And you know, this could be a pretty crazy position where you can, you know, take some profits here, run a 19 hour banger down to here. Yeah, the breakup structure isn't the best. It needs to pick up momentum. You do have this. You do have the topping formation though, with the supply creation. Look at all those highs. Like, it's just super. Like, I just hate, like, it feels really awkward for me to enter on this super low volatility price action, because when I see candles like this and just like looks so ugly, I don't want to put my stop loss anywhere near it. But you know, technically it is all valid, so maybe that's just something, you know, to enter, and then you know, regardless of the situation, you know, I'll learn from it. I'll journal it and I'll learn from it. And yeah, because this is technically valid. I don't think there even is any zone creations. And this was a decent timing as that to be a Wyckoff tap. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to just trail and add it here. Let me zoom out and just view this guy. That should look kind of weird. The overall model does look kind of weird. It needs to go from here. Truly, and we are in the weekend where price likes to range, so if we continue ranging here, it's not looking the best. Because that is, I guess, now the thing. This looks decent. You wouldn't really want to see price come above here for this model to still be valid. True. This is a good invalidation. This is the good invalidation. This is a bit. So what are we working with on this right here? 1.8 down to 1. Like, I'm almost tempted to trail my stop loss in this existing position to here, and then enter, you know, that would decrease my risk to 0.6, and then enter like a 0.4 position here, and then just have two separate positions where I'm not super confident in this, but I am pretty confident in this. but this has the potential to, just very high R potential. It's an interesting way to do it. It's not typical trade management. But I kind of like the opportunity. Because if price comes above here, it's not looking good anymore. And then this main range is just kind of invalidated in my opinion. And this high is probably going to get taken if you come above here. But if you do this, I would say that's still valid. And then I would just stop out my entire position. Now that I could easily just enter right here. True, I could just easily just re-enter though. That is the thing though, is like if you're going to do this, I can easily re-enter. If you're going to take this out, then it's kind of invalidated anyway. So I might as well just enter the entire position here and then re-enter the entire position here if that's what's going to happen. I guess it's always the case that you come down like this and then you go like this. And then it's like, like, am I going to enter? Like, I kind of like that plan I had. I'm actually just going to do that. Trail my stop to here. Thing is, we haven't technically got a confirmation yet to do so. Man. True, yeah. I think I gotta stick to the valid rules and trail and add to here. And then if I get stopped, I get stopped. And just trade it as this model. Yeah, really debating this one just because, just taking this trade, like, yeah, sure, I could throw a trade on right here for this, but just the management aspect is kind of interesting to me, like, not a typical scenario where if I'm really not confident in this high, should I even be trailing and adding, or should I just leave my existing position? That is another case. Like, gotta ask myself, like, am I really just only thinking of entering this because of the high RR, even though it's not really that nice of a trade. But at the same time, look at that top information. That is pretty nice. And you did come in for the extreme, so it's technically valid. Yeah. I think that is what I'm gonna do. End of the day, worst case, I'll just learn from it, so whatever happens, I'll learn from it. If we end up going higher here, boom, I'll just re-enter upon another break of structure. But I'm just going to trail and add to this high right here. And, if this doesn't hold, that'll be something interesting to put in the journal. I can screenshot that high and just be like, yeah, like, even though I had the top information, the bad high was still not valid to push price lower. Going to check for a trap zone here because we are bouncing. Is this valid as... It is a demand POI there on the 30. You have a little order block. Yeah, maybe since we're coming down with liquidity and we have a bad high, and there's a 30-minute order block, although it is harshly mitigated here. 5-minute, 3-minute, 2-minute. Is that mitigated? Yeah, pretty mitigated. Yeah, that's nitpicking. That is nitpicking there. I guess you have this. Like, look at the way price is reacting. It's horrible. Like, if we're really expecting price to range, because we're still kind of in that shitty weekend timing, like, why would it not just do that on, like, a weekly open, for example? But at the same time, that is nitpicking there. Yeah, I think I'm just going to take the trade and I'll journal it. I'll just, if this high doesn't hold, it makes sense. It had all the reasons not to. It also has all the reasons to, it's technically valid. It has all the reasons to go from this point. or if it wants to come up higher, it's gonna come to here. If not, it'll come to here. If not, it'll come to here and probably invalidate the model if it comes above this point. If we sweep this for the Model 1, it could, it could do a Model 1 for sure. It could. So that's also the reason. It's like, why trail and then also enter? Because it could do the Model 1 still when you don't have a breaker structure here just yet. Man, I'm sorry for all the debating that I am doing here. The whole point of me backtesting though is also just to get better at this, quicker with this decision making, just through repetition. You know what I mean? But I really like to think through other decisions. In the live market environment, I'll be watching this develop for some time, and you have to make that thought through decision within a couple minutes of price behaving in the way it is here. So it's good to just get that practice doing it. So be able to have that thought process as fast as possible in the future. But I'm thinking that I'm just gonna take this trade, and worst case I'll learn from it for sure. Worst case I'll learn from it. I might have to re-enter context. Everything still kind of remains the same. We have the volume area high deviation, which is pretty nice. We have that supply back by volume area high now. Return to zone is super high quality here. Super high quality here. Is this POI is perfectly tapped? Yeah. No, I'll just look at it as this POI. We have some demand in the return to zone. Something to be aware of. So yeah, I mean, that's also backed by that volume area, so that's something to be aware of for sure. Overall though, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 main primary lows within just such a local range. Day and 15 hours on its own. That's pretty nice. So I'd say the context here is pro, because we're in a confirmed distribution. Pro, the return to zone, solid 1 POI. 1 room for error POI. Range duration is like a day and 4 hours, I think I just read. 4 hours. Tap displacement. It's looking pretty solid, somewhat like an EHP vibe. Third tap POI is at extreme liquidity. So some room for error could come higher within the Model 2 premises, but not really much reason for a Model 1. Because then also if you come up for a Model 1, you don't really have the Model 1 flowing into a Model 2 here, because it just gets so extended there. Supply demand creation, yes. Breaking volume, yes. Range and efficiency is a no. Breaker structure quality is. You have a nice topping formation. You have a nice topping formation there, but you have a nice topping formation, but you also kind of built some liquidity coming into the breaker structure. Real quick, let me just go straight to it because we want to see the exact break. I think it was on this, on the 3 minute here. Yeah, that's the break you're entering on. Confluence, I think locally Bitcoin is semi-pro with that liquidity sweep, because you're sweeping some liquidity to the high, and you could get a rotation down. Semi-pro / neutral, because we're kind of also just ranging with liquidity on either end. Timing, weekend, pre-London. I'd say not the greatest. Some liquidity built and bad highs, but also a nice top formation weird because I'll add that in the room for error. Low liquidity on weekend, so top formation also looks like bad highs / liquidity. So this is kind of like a good test to see, like, is this going to be, on the weekend when the volatility is low and, candles aren't looking the best and the top information kind of looks like liquidity and bad highs, is it going to still serve as a top information that pushes price lower, or is it going to serve as liquidity? So this is actually like a really good one to, reflect back on to see how it works for future use. And that's also the reason I'm debating it so much, is because it's not a familiar situation I'm super familiar with. I actually did see something like this work on Algo, where you had I'll just show that right now, why not? Let's see how that worked. But yeah, there was kind of like that bad top information that looked like liquidity, but it did end up working. This was much cleaner though, for sure. This was your model. Yeah, this is like you had the top information, but you also kind of just had like some bad looking highs there. And you kind of didn't have the best looking third tap POI, although it was technically valid because the liquidity sweep deviated tap one, which is kind of like what we have right now. Although there is technically like some POIs who could come for higher, like this liquidity right here and that demand. This top information was much cleaner though. This was on that Friday in New York. So a bit different. There was some liquidity buildup though. So I think that's what I was talking about though, is like, kind of looking at on the lower time frame, going into that confirmation, is you looking at this as, it doesn't look the best. Like, it kind of looks like you're building some liquidity here, but at the same time, that kind of looks like some liquidity building, but at the same time, you also did have a top information with the supply creation. It was just that like weekend timing with the lower volatility and just kind of like the top information kind of looked a bit uglier, much uglier on XRP though, I can't lie. So yeah, and a bit lower time frame on XRP as well in our case. So yeah, we're gonna see how this works out though. But yeah, you can kind of see like the overall similarities. We're gonna see how this works out. Looks pretty clean. It's like really compressing down, so it's like either gonna squeeze up from here, or it's gonna need a bit more liquidity that it wants to grab locally here. We'll see. We will see. I would not be surprised though to see price want to sweep this high, and if not, just invalidate the model. Building more. Popping up into that POI there. Coming down into our room for error POI here. What is the RR at this moment? It's a 2. So it's going to take quite a bit of our position to de-risk that. You can kind of see this is where I'd be de-risking. It's like right as you're coming in potentially. Go and check now where Bitcoin is exactly located. Bitcoin is sweeping some liquidity locally. Not all of its liquidity. It is sweeping some liquidity. It could be one of those times where, you just got to stick to the plan. Deviating that volume very low, you can definitely see price. You could definitely see price potentially group it. I'll just throw it in actually into here. And this is a trade too. Because I already took trade 1 on Solana. There we go. Yeah, I'm gonna watch. I'm just gonna keep going. I don't think it's a valid time to de-risk right here. Although it is coming to a room for air POI. Let me watch it locally. Let me watch how it behaves locally. There's some liquidity above. We are on Sunday, approaching the weekly open, I'm pretty sure. Ranging here, building a lot of liquidity. Came to the extreme of the zone. So if we sweep liquidity prior to getting the move down, that's better for sure. There you go. Bang. Made the right decision not. What's it called? De-risking early. Now we're up 438 here. This is definitely valid time to de-risk there. That model came to completion. You know, I honestly generally use two separate models now I'm thinking about it. It's two, like they're both daily in duration and all that. So this will be trade 3. I do want to see how this guy plays out. And then we will end this video. Getting quite long. But yeah, definitely de-risked by now. Let's check where the rest of the market is at. Bitcoin's still looking like it could have some room for downside potentially. Could come and sweep down to these lows. ETH never sweeping the main high. Just invalidating the model before going lower. Kind of like creating, some sort of a really overextended distribution, using that as the extreme liquidity. Maybe there was a POI up deeper in there. ETH could have some more room for downside, although it has a lot of liquidity above. So yeah, we're approaching that weekly open. Doge never came into POI. Solana swept me out before going to that technical target, which does happen. So that's honestly a good enough for this trade. One of those And Solana's really coming down, in that fashion that we wanted to see for it to form an accumulation right here. Yeah, curious to see how XRP ends up moving here. Going into that weekly open. Prices. Getting liquidity sweep to the outside. Push down there. Honestly, this could be a TP2 location. Just coming down, like maybe I put it right at the top of this liquidity, for example. Seeing price coming down right here, sweeping some liquidity. So you de-risk here, you're taking 0.6 or 0.16%, 0.17%. And then just, maybe pull out another 0.25 here. Or maybe 50% de-risk. maybe a 0.4 or a 0.33 or something. Yeah, like another, pull out a third of the position going into that weekly open, where the weekly open could easily just, get a partial sweep and pop up. Before I make that decision, let's see what Bitcoin's up to. Bitcoin's pushing down. Yeah, I don't know, because Bitcoin could definitely come and sweep this main. Come and sweep down here before doing anything. Like, this wasn't super significant. There was a POI there, but you could also just sweep this before wanting to go up. So actually, this could be an interesting location to watch for a test entry on Bitcoin. A Model 2 test, to be specific. What do we got for a POI here? Yeah, this is kind of like a liquidity POI I was watching. Oh, there you go. Like, technically the lowest liquidity POI is way down there. But you got that move down on that weekly open. You could just get a confirmation right here on the weekly open. On Bitcoin, let's see. We're getting the moves down on some of these pairs. Doge, Doge and Solana still in their confirmed models. Oh wait, no, Solana actually completed. I could journal this guy. Let me group these guys. I'm just gonna put it in my notes. Just screenshot this guy, put it in my notes when I'm journaling. I just like to do that. Just to, reflect on price behavior and really get the most out of my backtesting sessions. All the different takeaways I make. With this technical target getting hit, so that's actually that trade that we talked about, calling it valid entry there. Yeah, damn. Calling it a valid entry there. That completed, so that is very nice and clean to see. Bang. Look at that beautiful deviation of top one. That's really a liquidity target, like there's just liquidity, even though there's not liquidity here, located there. Like, they like to create the POI overlapping with this high because maybe people just put their stop loss. I don't know what trading strategy would, but people just put their stop losses, at that high. But here, they put it at that high, even though it's a swing point, but it's a swing point that already got taken. So maybe prices down here and people are putting their stop loss at that level and then they sweep it out. It's interesting to see how that works. But it's just how these distributions have always been forming, is where they sweep that top one most of the time. I actually gathered data on that back in the day, just to see how many valid distributions had a deviation of top one versus not. It's very interesting to see. Is a high number. I have to go look at the stat that I pulled up. I think I'm analyzed like 40 or so models and checked in on that. And then also the ones where it didn't deviate, a lot of times they were either EHPs or they had a super shallow tap 2 for the most part. So those can be reasons to have a higher up tap 3. It's either EHP or super shallow tap 2. So here's just a little knowledge. So I mean, we got some potential accumulations coming down. I got some random notes here. Just put all these at the top. I'll journal all that. I'll figure out what the hell these ones even are. Don't even need this, to be honest. Oh, you know what? I fucked up. Wait a second. I look, you want all that TA back. Yeah, look, you want all this TA to put into this guy. Bang. Okay. Man, I'm sorry you guys gotta watch me do all that. For anybody who's still watching, I'm sorry you gotta. Alright, keeping the TA fairly simple. So yeah, thinking that's the TA I want to go with on Solana. Got a lot of journaling I'm going to do after this. Maybe I could start recording my journaling. This is looking crazy, but looks kind of weird now, but it was tradable because like I would never just trade this as a model on its own, but maybe on that tap, honestly. Just the fact that you had that internal distribution, though, is what really made it nice. Oh yeah, so what I was saying is, should I TP? Bitcoin coming into a potential third tap, I see it as valid reason to take a partial here, because this itself, this could easily be your market structure continuation prior to this being your main range low. So with this being your model 2, 1, 2, 3, that being your actual model, with this being the PS, that could easily be the case. So having a TP front running that when Bitcoin's simultaneously with Bitcoin sweeping this extreme liquidity POI, you know, for a potential test entry for a macro reversal, it could definitely be a nice place to be 50% out of this XRP position. So yeah, I would TP, you know, the other 33%, you know, de-risk here, another 33% TP there, and then just leave the rest down to this target. Maybe even have as a hedge if Bitcoin confirms here. So I'm just watching what Bitcoin does here. If Bitcoin gets a confirmation, I'm not going to make the decision on whether I'm going to enter it just yet, just because I'm going to end this video. So I've been going for pretty long, and then we'll resume and check that out on the next one. Okay. What time frame is this valid on? I think it was just a 5. It was, oh, it's not even a 5. It's like 3. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. So that's what the note I'm going to leave for myself when I get back. Our weekly open, just in case look over that timing. Is there even a text entry? Is it a looking like an LPS kind of entry? Kind of like an LPS, honestly. That's a potential entry. Weekly open. Where XRP's getting to move up, so nice that we. What is this? Why is it doing that? Top, right, black. Alright. Alright. So we're gonna see how this plays out. Cool, man. I'm not gonna keep this going any longer. I appreciate you guys for watching. 2 hours, 15 minutes, man. Anybody who made it end is a warrior. We'll see you guys on the next one. Later.